When celebrities tangle with the law, their status can sometimes afford them advantages that the rest of us don't have. Sometimes, but not every time. Today we'll be looking at some very famous people who committed some very serious crimes and still haven't finished paying their debt to society. Right now, as you're watching this, these 10 major celebrities are sitting in their jail cells, wondering where it all went wrong. In the 1990s, nobody struck terror into the hearts of up-and-coming rap artists quite like Marion Suge Knight. The Death Row Records CEO famously ran his label like a criminal enterprise, as he was alleged to have intimidated and physically assaulted his own artists, kept active gang members on his payroll, and shook down rival businessmen for publishing rights to songs which he had no legitimate claim to, such as Vanilla Ice's Ice Ice Baby. He's even been suspected of involvement in the deaths of legendary rappers Notorious B.I.G. and Tupac Shakur, and he's been to the big house more than once on probation violations stemming from various incidents. But a 2015 hit and run during the filming of NWA biopic Straight Outta Compton might land him there for the rest of his life. Upset with his depiction in the film, Knight had an on-set altercation with director F. Gary Gray directly before the incident at a Compton burger stand. Security footage shows Knight plowing his pickup truck into Terry Carter and Clay Sloan, former associates of his with whom he'd had a falling out. Carter died of his injuries, and Knight is currently incarcerated on $25 million bail while standing trial for his murder. He's also been indicted by a grand jury for threats he made to Gray, but that's the least of his worries. If convicted of the murder charge, he faces life in prison. Bobby Shmurda seemed destined for hip-hop greatness, having been rapping since the age of 10. He gained attention for his 2014 debut single, the title of which we cannot mention here, and the shmoney dance he performed in the video, which became a meme and has been referenced by everyone from Drake to Beyonce. His star seemed to be on the rise until he was arrested outside of his recording studio in 2016, accused of being the ringleader of murderous Crips offshoot GS9. The head of the unit which had been investigating Shmurda has said that the rapper's lyrics, which involve references to crimes including murder and drug dealing, read like an actual document of what Shmurda's crew was doing on the New York streets. After copping a plea deal to charges which included murder, attempted murder, and dealing drugs, the rapper was sentenced to 7 years in prison. He could be out as soon as 2020, if he can stay out of trouble for that long. He's already gotten into hot water for being involved in multiple brawls while inside, and also for sneaking a shank into his cell. One of the most successful and influential music producers of all time, Phil Spector is credited with creating the wall of sound technique, pushing listeners' speakers to their limit while creating a dramatic theatrical sound that was new to pop music at the time. He's worked with some of the most iconic artists of all time, from the Righteous Brothers to the Beatles to the Ramones, but he had always had a reputation for abusive and even threatening behavior in the studio, and the crime that put him in prison was dramatic and shocking enough to overshadow his legendary career. In February 2003, Spector met actress Lana Clarkson during a night out on the town, and she accompanied the producer back to his mansion. What happened next isn't known for sure, but Clarkson ended up dead with a single gunshot wound to her mouth. While Spector would claim in court that it was a horrible drunken accident, his case was destroyed by the testimony of his chauffeur, who told the jury that Spector had emerged from his house with a gun in his hand, saying, "I think I've killed someone." Spector's first trial ended in a hung jury, but he wasn't so lucky at his second. In April 2009, he was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to 19 years to life in prison. South African Oscar Pistorius inspired the world by becoming the first amputee runner to compete in an Olympic Games in 2012. Known as the Blade Runner, Pistorius, whose legs are amputated below the knee, ran on a pair of futuristic-looking carbon fiber blades. And while South Africa's track team did not medal that year, his admirable performance was seen as a breakthrough for disabled athletes. Pistorius might have someday shocked the world by becoming the first disabled Olympian to win a medal, if he hadn't shocked the world in a far more unexpected and violent way. In 2013, Pistorius shot his girlfriend Riva Steenkamp 4 times through the locked door of his bathroom, killing her. While he admitted the deed to authorities, he insisted that he had mistaken her for an intruder and had in fact believed that Steenkamp was still in bed when he fired the fatal shots. But neighbors testified that they had heard arguing earlier in the evening, and one even heard a woman scream as the shots were being fired. Pistorius was convicted of culpable homicide and sentenced to up to 5 years in prison. But after a series of appeals during which he was briefly released, the Supreme Court of Appeals reconsidered, finding him guilty not of culpable homicide, but of murder. He was resentenced in July 2016 to 6 years, even though the minimum sentence for murder under South African law is 15, as the judge noted that some time had been served and that Pistorius was remorseful. For years, Jared Fogle was the wholesome face of Subway restaurants, having famously dropped over 200 pounds by dieting on their veggie subs. He was featured in a long-running TV advertising campaign, appearing in more than 300 commercials between 2000 and 2013, and becoming as familiar a face as any movie star or musician. But in 2007, Fogle became the subject of an FBI investigation, with the cooperation of reporter Rochelle Herman Walren, who secretly taped conversations with him for over 4 years, revealed that Fogle had a thing for sex with minors. The investigation revealed that Fogle had repeatedly crossed state lines for arranged sexual encounters with children, and also had a stash of over 400 child porn videos, many of which had been given to him by the head of his children's charity, the Jared Foundation. He was sentenced in 2015 to over 15 years in prison, a place where they do not take kindly to child predators. A January 2016 attack by a fellow inmate left Fogle bloodied and bruised, and sources indicate that he is a target for constant abuse at his new home. The brother of rap impresario Master P, Corey Miller, formerly known as SHMURDA, made a name for himself as part of No Limit Records' star-studded roster in the 1990s. His debut solo release, 1998's Life or Death, sold over 1 million copies, and the rapper looked poised to help No Limit continue its dominance into the next decade, until a January 2002 incident in which he lived up to his unfortunate stage name. 16-year-old fan Steve Thomas was beaten and shot to death outside a Louisiana nightclub at which Miller had been performing, and surveillance video, which would eventually be posted to YouTube, pointed the cops in Miller's direction. He was convicted in 2003, but granted a new trial based on questions about jurisdiction and other issues. These same issues delayed Miller's second trial until 2009, and in the intervening years he was confined to house arrest, continuing to work on his music career. While the action on the surveillance tape is unclear, several witnesses pinned the shooting on Miller, and in August 2009 he was sentenced to life in prison, a conviction which has since been challenged and upheld. Sam Hurd was poised to become an NFL star after 5 seasons with the Dallas Cowboys. His first reception was the first completion ever thrown by Cowboys great Tony Romo, and in 2011 Hurd used his reputation as a sterling special teams player and talented receiver to secure a 3-year, $5 million free agent contract with the Chicago Bears. Unfortunately, Hurd would never get a chance to live up to his promise due to his terrible decision to get involved with the illegal drug trade. Hurd had been under federal investigation since his final days with the Cowboys, as a phone number traced to him was found in the phone of a prominent drug dealer, whom authorities had taken down. Shortly after Hurd's arrival in Chicago, the feds launched a sting, in which Hurd was recorded telling an undercover federal agent that he was interested in buying 5 to 10 kilograms of cocaine and 1,000 pounds of marijuana every single week to be sold in the greater Chicago area. Arrested and faced with this smoking gun evidence, Hurd pled guilty in a Dallas federal courtroom to attempting to procure large quantities of drugs with the intent to distribute, and was sentenced to 15 years in the slammer. Actor Michael JACE was cast in his breakout role on the hit FX cop drama The Shield in 2002, and he was a mainstay on the series throughout its entire 7-season run. After the series' end, his obvious talent earned him a few small roles in feature films and a recurring part on the TNT series Southland, but his burgeoning career was cut short in the most brutal and shocking fashion the actor's fans could imagine. In May 2014, JACE called 911 and calmly informed the operator that he had shot his wife of 14 years, April JACE. In fact, he had shot her to death in front of the couple's 2 sons, ages 5 and 8, then texted April's father to let him know what he had done and to ask him to pick up the children. JACE told police that he was upset that April may have been seeking a divorce, and that this paired with the couple's financial difficulties had led him to snap. It was an open and shut case, and in June 2016, JACE was sentenced to 40 years to life for his wife's murder. SHELLEY MALIL is an Indian-born, American-raised actor who scored with audiences in the 2005 comedy smash The 40-Year-Old Virgin. The comic had been landing bigger and bigger roles throughout the decade, and with his appearance in comedy king Judd Apatow's hit film, he looked set to punch his ticket to true stardom. But beneath Malil's affable exterior lay some very dark impulses, and one night in 2008, those impulses took complete control. In what authorities would claim was a premeditated attack, Malil viciously stabbed his girlfriend Kendra Beebe 20 times after spotting her drinking wine with another man. Although Beebe suffered punctured lungs and lost nearly half the blood in her body, she miraculously survived the attack and was able to testify at Malil's trial on charges of attempted murder and assault with a deadly weapon. Malil's conviction was swift, and at his 2010 sentencing he expressed extreme regret, asking to be sent to prison for the pain he had inflicted. The judge obliged him, handing down a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 14 years. Philadelphia's Meek Mill is one of the hottest rappers of the last decade. Signed by Atlanta-based rapper-turned-executive T.I. in 2008, Mill's career was nearly derailed early when he was imprisoned for 7 months on weapon charges that same year. But several successful mixtapes and collaborations later, Mill had built anticipation for his debut album to a fever pitch, and in 2012 he released Dreams and Nightmares, which debuted at number 2 on the Billboard chart and sold 165,000 copies in its first week. Unfortunately, his early brush with the law has never ceased to be a thorn in the rapper's side. Mill was placed on probation for 5 years after that stretch, and he has continually shot himself in the foot by violating his probation in all sorts of creative ways. He habitually fails to report his travel plans, an issue which resulted in another short prison stay in 2014, and has also been in hot water for assaulting 2 airport patrons and for failing multiple drug tests. After 5 violations in 6 years, a fed-up Philadelphia judge in late 2017 ordered Mill returned to prison for 2 to 4 years. Fans have taken up a social media campaign lobbying for his freedom, and even Philly basketball legend Julius Erving led a protest in support of overturning his sentence. But it looks like the justice system isn't inclined to give him any more leeway, regardless of his fame.